Welcome to Doing Business with a Servant's Heart podcast. Doing business in life with a purpose, serving others and achieving success. I'm your host, Steve Ramona. We created this show for you because we want everyone to be motivated, inspired, and educated during our show to learn how to do business and live life to make an impact in the world. While you listen to my next incredible guest, I want you to think about who you serve today and how you'll do that and what impact you'll create today. Not tomorrow, not a year from now, but let's create an impact today. And with that being said, my guest today is incredible story. And he's taken that incredible story and it could have been catastrophic. And he's really doing great things in the world. He's truly a servant's heart. David, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Let's start with your history. I don't like to do history, but your background or past has led you to where you are today, which is, I want people to hear because it's incredible and it gives people hope.
Yeah, I guess the best place to start was the night where everything changed. It was December 2015, December 11th. You can still remember it. By that point, my life was already in a real difficult spot. I had physical issues going on, everything from back pain to mental health issues that were roaring back into a challenging state in terms of OCD and other things. Marriage was in a real rough spot, mostly because my wife and I went through all kinds of, I'll just be honest, it was hell on trying to start a family. We lost 2 pregnancies in ways I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. And I had to face all kinds of feelings in myself and supporting my wife that I was not prepared for. All that was starting to come up, impact my marriage, and had a side hustle that I'd spent 3 years working on nights and weekends that was about to fail. All these things were kind of coming together. But to top it all off, the biggest part was that my daughter, who we fought to bring into the world, I started to look at her with, I'll just be frank, I started to resent her. And I hate to say that, but in some ways I don't anymore because I've lost all the guilt because it's just honest, because I think as a parent, we need to be honest with ourselves. And it wasn't that I didn't like her or being a parent. I love that. But it was like for the first time in my life, I felt like everything that I've done to make myself successful, not in the trite materialistic way, but just I set a goal, I'm going to achieve it. All those strategies started to fall short. And so long story short, I slammed into what you might call rock bottom, the lowest point that I've ever been in my life. And that's, there was a point where I went to actually talk to my wife. She was asleep with my daughter. And I was just in tears because I'm like, I cannot see a way out of this mess. Everything that I had done to try to make my life better was somehow or another some form of, let me play Robin Hood. Let me take from this part of my life that feels rich and give it to this part that's poor. But day in and day out, doing that really well, I just exhausted myself on every level. And that led me to basically apologize to my wife and daughter and say, I'm going to fail you. I don't have what it takes here. And in that humbling moment, I got inspiration for what completely transformed my life, which was I can still feel my heart back then. It was beating so loud. It was so intense. It's like a feeling that I just like, I will never forget. And it was like as if my heart was saying, okay, finally, now you're listening, right? You often hear about people say, oh, our bodies are immediate gratification obsessed and are going to sabotage us and all these things, and they're going to take advantage of us the moment we have a weak moment. Well, that was my weakest moment. And my body, I hated at that point because of all the struggles. And yet in that moment, my body actually was standing there right with me. And I get chills now even saying it. It was like, okay, now it's time to start living. Now it's time to start actually doing what you're here to do. And I realized something really profound. I realized that when my body is sick or I break a bone or something, it doesn't play that Robin Hood game. And it started to get me to wonder and go, wait a second, why is everybody approaching work or performance and productivity, fulfillment and well-being in this way that's constantly at odds? I can go on vacation and recharge and have well-being, Then I go back into the office, grind for another 40 weeks or 15 weeks or whatever it is, deplete the well-being, deplete the sense of fulfillment, and then just wash, rinse, and repeat. And it drove me into the ground, personally, in terms of doing that really well.
Yeah.
And getting to a point where I was just like, this has to change. And that's kind of what sparked it for me.
Incredible story. And when you first told me the story, it's blown me away. Me and my wife have actually discussed it, which is the power of what you learn. What did you learn through this potential tragedy challenge that you're using today?
That's a great question because I've learned a lot along the way.
Mm-hmm.
In that moment, I would say I learned to hear that voice within. Um, and it just whispers. And you could call it whatever you want. It's called 1,000 different names.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? We all have it, and it all is something that's far more wise than this is. And when we're willing to finally hear it, it's incredibly powerful. So I would say that's what opened the door to beginning to build a relationship with that.
Crazy. We all have a voice. That's
Mhm.
not, if you're human, you have, I think dogs, but won't go that black hole.
Yeah.
But we all have a voice, and whether the decision to listen or not, I talk about indecisiveness when I consult businesses. It's the worst thing you could do. But even
Yeah.
listening to your voice, and yes or no, making that decision, you made the decision, and look where you are today. You said an incredible word, David, exhaustion. You said exhausted. We're exhausted every day. And I don't mean, I'm talking also to the energy where you just had the greatest day. You went out with your daughter, you made a sale, you this, that. It can be tiring. How did you deal with that?
And what were you asking? How did I deal with that? The being so like rock bottom exhausted or just day-to-day exhaustion?
The rock bottom for you, because that's the top one is tough, but you got that
Yeah.
exhaustion, which people run into all the time. And that's the one that kills you. Excuse me, the wrong word, that really hurts you.
No, it really does. So it was interesting because I've got a book coming out later this year, and it's called Trust Life, literally with a question mark at the end. So it's like a question, Trust Life. And it explores the four paradoxes that are at the root of all the contradictions in the wisdom of our day. And that was the first one. That's the one that I was banging my head against that was driving me nuts, which is
Mm-hmm.
here I am. I'm driven. I'm determined. I want to help provide for my family. I have all the right intentions. I've killed myself and will continue to do so. And yet, pretty much, one of the things that I forgot to mention is that I spent 5 years interviewing people after that night, trying to, initially I was just wanting to get advice and see, okay, is this idea that I have kind of crazy? But the more I started to interview people about their, with my background in tech and user experience, I just started asking questions that most people are like, I've never thought of it in that way. I've never
Mm-hmm.
really thought about my life in that way. And most people would say, when you figure that one out, let me know. And I'm like, wait a second, you've got it figured out. You've got the business. You've got the accolades. You've got the accomplishments that most people would say, oh my God, that's a whole lifetime's worth of accomplishments. And yet inside you feel like this. Inside you feel exhausted, right? And what I found was all the advice out there was saying, use time you don't have with energy that doesn't exist to try to foster some change that's going to happen long after I need it, which is right now.
Yeah.
And so I call that the first step paradox. How do you literally take a first step when you got nothing? And in my case, I had nothing in my tank, right? I like to use analogies. It's almost like calling a AAA person to come and they're like, cool, I see you're broke down. I see your car's, the steam's coming out. I need you to just drive another 20 miles and then I'll help you out.
Oh my
Right?
God.
Like
Yeah.
that's in essence what we're doing,
Yeah.
right? And it's funny because, I'm very spiritual. I grew up in a family that, I was raised Jewish. But to me, even all the different religions, they all kind of speak to what I call the critical breakthrough. A critical breakthrough is, and there's four of them, one for each of the critical paradoxes. What most of us don't realize is we start our day and we try to navigate our day, constantly adding to our day. Let me do more. Let me do this. I'm exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
What do I do to actually change things, to make more ease? And what we fail to realize is there's a breakthrough that you could spend the rest of your life trying to fully understand the wisdom in this, which is what actually starts. I believe grace, I believe miracles, I believe magic and all. It all starts with release, which means sitting there, pausing, coming to a point of stillness where something else, where you create space for this, again, something that's been called 1,000 different names, to inform you, to guide you, to inspire you, to not recharge you in the I'm not working, but to literally in that moment. We've all had it. We've all had moments, whether we're at church, whether we're in front of a board, in a meeting, whatever it is, where something aligns and something happens, and from the inside out, we light up. And it's a lighting up that can be subtle. It could be something that's not outrageous externally, but we feel it. And so the way to deal with exhaustion more often than not, and there's more steps to this than that, but is starting by releasing, going, okay, what is the thing that I need to let go of right now? And more often than not, it's a thought, it's a should, it's a have to, it's a feeling of guilt. It's something that inside us is causing us to go like this.
I know.
And then eventually we'll get to a point where, like I did that night, which is life says, guess what? You need to stop, and you'll literally let go.
Yeah. And it's scary because that leads to suicides, drug overdose. I mean, all those crazy things when they don't listen to that voice or do what you're saying. And I God bless that you're here and doing great things. But you said something that's very interesting with regards to everything you went through and the book you wrote. And I want to make a point because this is a big point you made. Your first step paradox. Is that what you called it? That the first step paradox, right?
That's the first of the 4 critical life
Yeah.
paradoxes. Yeah.
Well, let's think about that. And I want you to talk about this. Steps go 2 ways, forward or backwards.
Hmm?
I know you're talking forwards, but what's that person saying? My paradox is going backwards, that first step. What do I do?
That's interesting.
It's a tough question. I know.
No, it's not. It's just there's different ways to respond in the sense
Mm-hmm.
that not all the paradoxes are necessarily steps, but in this regard, we need to take a step. And oftentimes our challenge is that we've taken too many steps.
Mm.
Does that make sense? And so
Yes.
in a way, we have this elastic band, think of that, and we're trying to run, and what life is saying, what God is saying, what spirit is saying, what the universe, whatever you want to call it, is saying, it ain't in alignment. You can go forward. You might achieve whatever small KPI task thing that you're focused on, but it's not in alignment, which means the ripple effects of that, even if you succeed, are going to ripple out and cause all kinds of negative consequences for other people, and that in turn influence you.
Yeah.
And so even though you might measure your KPI and say, yes, I was successful, lo and behold, actually, it's going to eat you up either from the outside in or inside out. And why do you see so many people who on the surface seem like you should have, there's no reason for you to be feeling the way you do internally? A lot of my clients are like that, is because of those reasons. And so the person who's at, why I hesitated initially when you asked, was the person who's falling backwards. It's not necessarily a bad thing. If the key question, whether you're going forward or backwards in the way you frame the question, is, are you willing to be fully honest in your awareness?
Yeah.
That's the key. If you're willing to be fully honest in your awareness, there'll be a moment where you actually release and go, I can't do this. This is more than me in terms of the ways in which I've gone about it. And that's a very humbling moment. That's where grace comes in. That's where creativity comes in. That's where inspiration comes in. And I do a practice with people where oftentimes in the first session, I'll just, we'll go through different practices and stuff. But at the very end, I'll say, okay, I've got 5 prompts. I want you to just start by responding to the first one. And it literally, they're just different forms of release. I don't know how I'm going to, ... And they'll start initially slowly. And then it's, I'm sick and tired of, and then the feeling will start coming in and so forth. And what eventually comes is people just saying all these things. It's not about complaining. It's not about being petty. It's about being honest with what's really inside them and their situation. And once they do that, once you release, the life force inside you, the spirit inside you, which is constantly wanting to expand, now has room to do so. And the second breakthrough is expansion. So the moment you release, you actually open the door to that next step that does move you forward.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yep. And that's the air of the balloon. And I kind of tricked you in a little bit because I made it sound like that step forward. A lot of times we have to take a step backwards or two,
Mhm.
especially in business. And that's why I love what you said. Hey, I'm selling this widget. It's not selling. I got to step back, go, maybe I need to sell this service. Maybe I don't sell widgets anymore. Love what you said. So powerful. Because again, I moved you in a direction that you answered it so well. Didn't mean to do that, but it was just like I want people to understand the first step could be both ways. And that's your paradox. Not, and you said it's not bad at all. I'm dying to ask two questions. So one is magicandawe.com, Magic and Awe, your business. Why that name? It's so cool, by the way.
Thank you. It's taken me a while to feel comfortable enough to actually use that. And everyone asks me, they're like, why? I truly believe that when all is said and done, what we're all truly aspiring, what we want, are what I call moments of magic and awe. If I were to ask you, what is the most amazing, precious moments of your life, when you're sitting on your deathbed and you look back on your life and go, this is the moment that I'm going to remember that's going to be with me? You might describe a moment where you're looking up at the Milky Way galaxy as you're atop some big mountain, right, where you don't have light pollution and all that. You might describe a moment holding your child for the first time. You might describe just a moment of sheer release when you've forgiven somebody or they've forgiven you. Whatever it is, there are moments in which we're connected to our vitality. We're aligned with our heart and our, what I would say, our true self. And we're deeply connected to ourselves, someone else, nature, or the cosmos. When I work with people, it's funny because I tell people that if you want to be successful in business, it's not about grinding that much more. It's not about 4xing from 2xing how much work you get done in your day. It's about alignment. When you're aligned, the amount of effort and resistance and the seesawing between fulfillment and well-being and performance subsides. And then you enter this zone I call your zone of brilliance, where you literally light up from the inside out. When we're in those moments that we're going to remember, or those moments where we're on fire on the basketball court or whatever else it is, they're full of this energy and this dynamic that when I've asked all my clients, okay, what are you feeling, whatever, they inevitably will describe a bunch of different things, and they get to, man, it was magical, or man, it was awesome.
Yeah.
Or, I was full of awe. And so to me, at the end of the day, that's what we want, and we're all chasing that. Yeah, we want to have impact, but we want to have impact so when we actually see the looks on people's faces, that's what we're experiencing. Or we want to be able to retire and go travel and see these places. I'm going to Peru in a couple months. On my bucket list has been Machu Picchu. I cannot wait to see this place. And it's like when you can't not look at a picture and feel a sense of awe. That's what we want,
Yes.
and we're chasing that, but we're actually sacrificing all the moments where it's going to happen, which is right here, right now.
Love it.
Yeah.
I knew the answer, but I wanted the audience to hear it because it's so cool. And again, the name's so cool. The other question is, this is even bigger. So if you met God face to face, what would you ask him? What question?
Oh, I've thought about this question for a while. So when I saw it, I laughed. Because I think, in the prompt you asked me that, and I was like, okay, finally, I can share this with somebody. I love asking questions. I do. It's what led me to be really successful in the field of user experience, which is primarily where the domain I worked in the tech, as a tech leader. Um, I'm always thinking, everyone asks me, like, wow, you ask questions in different ways, right? And I realized, I'm like, I could ask God any question, and all the questions would be sort of like one dimension. But the one thing that would actually make me most curious is there have been, God knows how many people, or even animals. I don't even know if they can connect, in terms of what they can connect to, and so forth. But I would love to know the one question God's never been asked. I'd just love to hear what that question is, just to
That's
see
interesting.
life from that perspective and go, wow, okay, because I have to imagine pretty much every question I could think of has already been asked.
Yeah.
So to me, that would be not only just something that would fill a curiosity, but I actually think that would completely shift how I look at a lot of things, because it's almost like, wow, could you imagine whatever that might be. I can't even fathom what it is. So, um, yeah, that's the question I would ask.
And boy, what a discussion topic. You can go so many different ways
Yeah.
with that. So one thing you said in your book's called Trust Life with a question mark. How important is trust in all this?
I think that's part of what allows us to experience magic and awe. And
Mm,
we're here actually to learn to trust ourselves more, to trust each other more, and to trust whatever that higher power is that you believe in more. I think every day is um, everything that's happening, even healing itself, is all reflecting back wisdom and guidance to help us just trust more with the, how should I put it, the inner wisdom that's in us or that's coming through us in a way. And man, we can create a lot of noise that interferes with that. And
yeah.
we can make a lot of really poor decisions, whether we're trying to make our business successful, parent our children, or just leave the world a better place um, when we're out of alignment with that. Or here's the other part, because I actually teach a course called Mastering the Six Eyes of Your Inner Knowing, because we often think of it as just intuition, but there's a lot more to it. Um, in 2019, right before the pandemic, so literally end of November, beginning of December 2019. So the pandemic's coming up a couple months later, after a year of resisting that voice inside me that's saying it's now time to walk away from an incredible job where you have a lot of respect, flexibility, like everything that everybody would say. There's no reason to walk away. I had this voice that was saying, you will not fully trust unless you're willing to let go of this. And one of the things I've learned is I have a sense that I can sometimes get, not that this might sound a little strange, not that I can like sense the future and all its details, but I have these impulses and senses, not impulses, these senses, if you will, that just give me a glimpse of something. The other day I was at a training and my daughter was, staying at the hotel with us, and there was nature all around. And I swear to you, I had this sense while I'm sitting there that I'm like, oh my God, I don't know why, because there was this little pond there and she's normally, very safe and but very comfortable in nature. I had a sense of her falling through the ice in the water. And I was like, that's just a weird thought, whatever. It just happens. Um, Literally 2 days later, my wife says to me, guess what our daughter did?
Oh,
And she literally tried, luckily she didn't fall in, but she literally was standing on the ice, which is something she's never, ever done before. So little things like that show up time and time again that are actually, we all have that capability, not to predict, okay, here's the winning, lottery ticket numbers, but we have something where we can sense, okay, this is the path that I'm going to be on. The other art of this is not just tuning into that voice, but understanding how do we integrate that guidance in our day to day without blowing up our life. And the way in which I actually, and I learned this the hard way, that's how I've done everything else. I wish I could say I was super, I even tell people this when I'm working with them. I wish I could say I was super strong and brave and I decided to trust life. Life had to literally bring me to my knees, and I had no other choice but to go. And I even make this point early on in my book. I'm not out to prove to anybody that you should trust life. I will, however, help you see that not trusting life is not helping you, is actually making your life a lot worse, right?
yeah.
And so sometimes going the inverse is easier to embrace to get to where it's going to lead to. If that makes sense.
That makes a lot of
So
sense. Yeah, no, that's great. And what a way to end this show. We've run out of time. We came full circle because you need to trust that voice. You started with voice, we ended with trusting that voice and hope, and most of the time it's correct. And this was incredible. Deep, but I love deep podcasts because I want people to dig down in their soul, what you did for yourself and talked about that and fix it. Do something right. Live a true life. With that being said, how can people get a hold of you, David?
just go to my website. Like you said, it's easy to remember, magicandawe.com.
Okay.
There's all kinds of information on there. I share a lot of my practices and techniques and things so people can just experience that and see what it is. But that's the absolute quickest and most efficient way to do so.
Fantastic. Audience, as I always say at the end of these shows, especially this show, because it's deep, there's a lot there. If you didn't have a pad and paper and a pen, what's the greatest thing about a podcast? You can reverse, you can forward, back and forth. Watch these shows over and over again. Listen to what David's given us at no cost, but these are game changers for life. You heard his story. It changed his life. He may not be sitting with me today. Can't think of a more powerful story. So keep that in mind. And don't forget my TV show, Together We Serve, Fridays at 2 p.m. Pacific and 5 p.m. Eastern. And also the podcast swag. We got hats and hoodies and T-shirts with Doing Business with a Servant's Heart. Your network's your net worth. So I'll have the link in the show notes, and as well to reach out to David on his website. And do me a huge favor. When you see this on YouTube and when you see it on my podcast, comment on it. Talk to Dave. Leave him a comment. He'll see it. I'll see it. I'll get it to him. If you have a question, don't want to reach out to him, put it there and we'll answer it. Because I'm going to tell you that a lot of these podcasts where people dig deep like David did, it could take one sentence that could really make a huge difference in your life. And don't we want that for everybody? We'll see you all in the next episode of Doing Business with a Servant's Heart. Thank you all.